don't want my government to fail. I don't want to enjoy... You're seeing people on social media, I cannot wait to watch Trump make mincemeat of Starmer. No, I don't want to see that. It might happen. I don't want to see it happen. Nobody should want to see it happen, even if you pathologically hate the ground that Labour walk on, and Keir Starmer to boot. Let's meet with Alain Tolhurst, chief reporter at Politics Home, on this and a few other big stories as well. Good afternoon to you, Alan. Nice to have you with us again.
Thank you very much. You too. Nice to be here.
It's a big day, of course, over there in the States. And, of course, from our side of things, we are watching and waiting to see what a new relationship, a special relationship, what that looks like. Keir Starmer obviously seeking a trade deal with the new US president. And we understand that there's been a new mini cabinet formed to focus on getting that up and running. But, there's a battle to be had there. I mean, they've not all been exactly gracious in the past towards the new president.
No, and I think it's become pretty, de rigueur to regurgitate these kind of disobliging things that they've been said. I actually don't necessarily think that is going to be an issue, really. I think Donald Trump has made up with, most famously, his vice president, J.D. Vance, saying extremely unkind things about him. So did Elon Musk, and they've managed to patch things up. I think Donald Trump, what he likes is kind of people to say sorry and kind of move on. He seems to, I think he almost likes that he's kind of got that over them, that they did say this thing and now they're having to sort of apologise and row back. So I don't think that's going to be the problem. I think something like the Chagos Island deal, I think that does represent a genuine issue, because I do think that there are interests, not just Trump, but kind of in the wider kind of Trump world, who are very angry about this potential deal and what it means with China, etc. So that, I think, could be quite a bit of a stumbling block. I think what you're going to see around trade is Jonathan Reynolds, the business minister, who's off to Davos with Rachel Reeves and others this week, has talked about the UK being seen as like a Goldilocks country, this idea that actually it's very open to free trade, but it has lots of kind of regulations in place to prevent it from being, from kind of it all kind of falling apart. And I think that's where they're probably going to try and sell themselves. It's whether, Trump and his acolytes will see it quite the same way. We know, obviously, they are looking to put tariffs on, and whether the UK gets dragged into a lot of those tariff wars that Trump looks to want to get going from day one in his office.
Yeah, and obviously the to-do list as the new American president is already pretty vast. And although clearly as a Western democracy and as economically a very viable and, attractive despite all of our issues, the underpinning reality is that, we are a country that people do want to do business with. But nonetheless, I'm guessing we're not top of the to-do list at the moment over there in the Oval Office.
No, I think we kid ourselves a little bit. We talk about the special relationship. I mean, but I think it's a bit of a one-way thing in that sense. I think we talk a lot about America and what the presidency is going to do. I don't necessarily think that it's quite reciprocated over in Washington, D.C. There are some pretty big competing priorities, not just, as I said, China, but obviously, it's hugely close to Israel and everything that's going on there. We saw with the ceasefire and what's going to happen at the end of that ceasefire, and as those talks kind of continue with the war. There's obviously lots of other things that the American president's got to try and deal with, things like immigration and stuff he knows he wants to tackle straight away. So yeah, perhaps making nice with the new Starmer administration is perhaps not in the sort of top few of those kind of list of priorities.
Yeah. Well, it's clearly the tariff thing is the bit that we want to swerve if we can. But and I wonder whether Mr. Trump is really going to start slapping on these 5-10% tariffs all over the place. The smart money says you won't see that in those first batch of dockets that he signs off in the Oval Office.
No, I don't think they'll be straight off to the UK. He obviously has considerable business interests and kind of personal interests in the UK and in Scotland and stuff. And so I don't necessarily think that he's going to want to arbitrarily kind of slap those on. I think if we get into a tariff war, I think we're beyond no illusion that he would go there. He would go that far. I just don't think that's necessarily going to be the starting point. I think the UK's got a little bit of time, a little bit of wiggle room before we get to that point, I think.
And in terms of the United Kingdom's place against this new world, Donald Trump is sort of promising to turn it on its head. Let's get rid of all the DEI nonsense, the gender stuff, people in the government having to give themselves a pronoun. And some of that, quite a lot of that stuff, I think even, lefties are finding it a bit irksome. It's a bit odd. It's that defines in many ways. I mean, pronouns will never be the top of the big political list, but just that word sort of defines a new world for many people that we're in, and a world that lots of people don't like. And Trump is the man that's going to change it. But of course, he's got to do much more than that. He's got to really deliver.
Yeah, and I think that UK finds itself in an interesting position there, because amongst a lot of those kind of Western liberal economies, there has been kind of a shift rightwards. We've seen those kind of more social democratic governments collapse in places like Canada. Obviously, we know that in Germany, Scholz is in trouble, Macron in France. We've seen the success of someone like Milei in Argentina and Meloni in Italy and all those kind of places. So in a sense, the UK electing a social democratic party with such a commanding majority has made us a bit of an outlier. And so therefore, I think that's why it's going to be difficult, I think, for Starmer and his party to kind of find their place amongst those kind of top countries. And I think that's what they've got to try and navigate. As I said, that kind of Goldilocks kind of thing. The part of what the UK is trying to do is trying to be that kind of bridge between the US and Europe. What they don't want to be essentially is get caught between those two and end up with kind of the worst of both worlds. And I think that's what the UK have got to try and sort out. And I think they've got to work out where they fit in with, like, say, that Trump agenda that you just talked about.
One of the issues that even critics of Trump often say is that, on foreign affairs, he did all right last time. Now, whether he did all right or whether it's a case of not a lot happened, I don't know, but nonetheless, I mean, there is some evidence that he went to places, I don't mean literally, but actually literally he did go to some places that other presidents hadn't done. And even to the right up to date today, people saying he could even get the Nobel Peace Prize this year. So, I mean, is this a man that or many people underestimate?
Well, yeah, I mean, he was the only one willing to go to North Korea and meet, Little Rocket Man, as he calls the leader over there. Yeah. But he went and had a big summit with Putin that obviously did not dissuade Putin from invading the Ukraine. And I think a lot of people are worried about whether Trump is what he's going to do with regards to ending. He's talked about ending the Ukraine war in a single day. What that means, I think people are a little bit worried about. I think more pressing, as I say, is what's going to happen in Gaza with that ceasefire coming to force, what's going to happen into that. But there are lots of other big global conflict concerns. I think the feeling was that first time round that he was still rather constrained by the kind of old Washington kind of niceties, that he had people around him who were trying to sort of mitigate a lot of his actions. I think that he understands that a lot better now and is trying to put people in place like Pete Hegseth in the military and that sort of stuff, and Marco Rubio at the state, who are going to be less likely to to mollify his more kind of tendencies, and actually it's more likely that he's going to be able to go a little bit more unchained in this second term round.
And the one thing he might do as well is overturn the TikTok ban, at least for a bit.
Yes, yeah. If you've been missing out on your videos of people dancing or cats and that sort of stuff,
haven't slept for a day.
No, I think it's interesting, and it was obviously really interesting that it's a classic example of kind of, in a sense, not him being lucky. I mean, people talk about the economy. He took over a good economy in 2016. He's taken over an economy that actually, on a macro level, is doing really well under Biden. But obviously, people didn't feel it individually. But actually, he might take over that. And another, the TikTok ban is extremely unpopular in America, and then he gets to come in on day one and reverse something which is massively popular with young people. So it's sometimes people are kind of lucky generals. People get the kind of get the breaks as they come in. Yeah, he'll definitely chalk that up as a win, like he'll chalk everything else up as a personal win. He's a bit like my toddler. My toddler's always saying, "Oh, I found this all by myself," even though you got it out and put it out for them. And Trump's a little bit like that as well. Stuff gets put in his way, and then suddenly he sort of takes credit for it.
Yeah, well, we'll watch and see how the TikTok thing pans out. He's of course got a very close relationship with social media, so that might be interesting. Over here, Cabinet Secretary told to investigate Attorney General over a conflict of interest. There's Robert Jenrick calling for an investigation into the Attorney General's political conflicts. This is Lord Hermer. Of course, in the past, he's had clients like Jerry Adams. Now, it's a tricky one, isn't it, for a lawyer that goes into politics, because you will, by definition, have had previous clients. I don't know what the way around this one is, Alan, but I can see how it can become an uncomfortable look, and that's clearly where the government have ended up.
Yeah, it's a bit of it's a bit like they hired Tulip Sadiq to be this anti-corruption minister, knowing she had these links through her aunt to the government in Bangladesh, and it's a bit like they must have known when they plucked Harmer out of the legal sphere and made him appear to specifically bring him into the to government to do this. They must have known at the time that he had these kind of this past, obviously, and all the clients that he did. And the moment they're hiding behind the kind of the convention, which is that government law officers, do not disclose any advice that they give to ministers, or what kind of advice they give on what subjects. But as Robert Jenrick, who's written this letter to the cabinet secretary, points out, that's more to protect kind of the workings of government, not to kind of shield the law officers themselves from scrutiny. And I think there's going to be this continue to be on. I'm sure that most papers have got people working on this full time, going back through all the kind of cases that Harmer will have covered over the years, and I'm sure there'll be plenty more to come out of this. At some point they are going to have to make a statement on it. He can't continue to be silent on this and not kind of give an update as to what he's done. So I think this is definitely one that's going to run all this week, and probably beyond as well.
Yeah, I think so too. Alan, thank you. Alain Tolhurst is chief reporter at Politics Home, with us on the programme. Over